She lost her husband by being late to the meeting because she helped an elderly woman, but she was the mother of a single millionaire. Chloe had just one request for that Thursday afternoon: not to be late. That's it, not to be late. Tyler had sent her a message that morning very early before work, with a different tone than usual. Not the, "Hi, good morning, I love you," she got every day. It was different. It was, "Tonight is important. I need you to be there at 6 sharp. I reserved our favorite spot. Don't make me wait, okay?" And he had ended it with a heart emoji, something he almost never did. Chloe had read that message 3 times, and she felt that knot in her stomach, the one you get when you realize something big is about to happen. They had been together for 2.5 years, 2.5 years of a relationship that had been beautiful most of the time, but that in recent months had fallen into that silent wear and tear we pretend doesn't exist. He wanted more commitment. She wanted more time. He felt she ran away from serious conversations. She felt he pushed too hard, and the two of them stayed together, without resolving anything, because deep down they still really liked each other. But that message had the ring of a decision. Chloe left work at 5:20. The restaurant was about 20 minutes away by bus, and she had time to spare. She had already picked out her outfit the night before, already knew what she was going to say, had even rehearsed in her head how she would sit, how she would smile when she arrived. She was ready. But life has a way of throwing a wrench in things exactly when we can least afford it. The rain started pouring down all at once, suddenly, the way the sky sometimes dumps everything at once without warning. Chloe was on the sidewalk without an umbrella, running to get to the bus stop, when she almost bumped into an elderly woman walking in the opposite direction. She saw the shoes first. They were dark leather shoes soaked up to the ankle. Then she saw the hands, slender fingers, closed carefully around a black purse as if holding something valuable. And then she saw the face. A woman with completely white wavy hair that the rain had plastered to her forehead. She wore a beige coat, and the floral umbrella she was holding, pink flowers on a cream background, was closed, tucked under her arm. The woman couldn't manage to open it. "Ma'am, let me help," Chloe said before she even thought about it. The woman looked at her with eyes squinted against the rain. She didn't say anything. She just held out the umbrella. It took Chloe a moment to realize the mechanism was stuck. She pushed a little, twisted the handle, pushed again, and the umbrella opened with a snap, flowers blooming in the middle of the rain. "Thank you," the woman said with a firm voice, firmer than Chloe expected. But when she tried to take a step, her foot slipped slightly on the wet asphalt and she leaned to the side. Chloe grabbed her arm instinctively, and she stayed there. It wasn't a conscious choice. It was that thing that happens to certain people, a kind of reflex of humanity that comes before reasoning. She didn't think about the time. She didn't think about Tyler. She didn't think about the restaurant. She just held that woman's arm with both hands and said, "Take it easy. I'll go with you." Her name was Martha. Chloe only learned this after a few minutes of walking together under the floral umbrella, with the rain hitting on both sides and the wind trying to flip the umbrella inside out. Mrs. Martha was 74 years old, wore a necklace of small pearls around her neck, and was looking for a doctor's office she was sure was on that street, but which they soon discovered was on the street parallel. "My son explained it to me 3 times, she said, in a tone mixed with anger and shame. "And I still got it wrong. It happens to everyone, Mrs. Martha. Not to everyone. It happens to a woman who spent 50 years knowing how to get everywhere by herself." There was something in that phrase that tugged at Chloe's heart. It wasn't just wounded pride. It was a deeper pain, from someone who was losing an independence that had been, for a long time, her greatest source of pride. They walked together to the right street. Chloe went with her to the office door, waited for the receptionist to confirm the appointment, and only let go of Mrs. Martha's arm when she saw her safely seated in a chair. When she looked at her phone, it was 16 minutes to 6. The restaurant was on the other side of the city. She ran, caught the first bus that came, stood holding onto a wet handrail, texted Tyler, "On my way, gonna be about 15 minutes late, something came up, I'll explain." She kept staring at the screen, waiting for the 2 blue check marks to appear. But the message stayed with a grey check mark for a long time. Weak signal. When she got off the bus, it was 6:22. She walked into the restaurant out of breath, hair stuck to her forehead and sneakers soaked. The waiter she recognized from other visits looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Their table was empty. There was nothing on it. No glass of water, no folded napkin, no sign that anyone had sat there recently. Chloe asked the waiter. He blinked before answering. The gentleman who was here waited until 6:10. He asked me to let you know he had to leave. Did he leave any message? The waiter hesitated. He left a small box, said to give it to you if you showed up. It was a small box, dark blue velvet. Chloe opened it with fingers still cold from the rain. Inside was a ring, a simple, delicate solitaire with a clear stone in the center, and beside it, a folded little note, in Tyler's square handwriting. I was hoping you'd get here before this, but since you didn't, I'm leaving it here. Maybe you'll understand what this ring means, or maybe you won't. Either way, I needed to try. But I also need to know if I'm trying alone. Call me when you can. Chloe stared at that note for what felt like an eternity. She couldn't say how long. The box in her hand, the ring inside, the rain outside. When she called Tyler, he answered on the second ring. She started explaining. The old lady in the rain, the stuck umbrella, the doctor's office on the wrong street. He listened in silence, and when she finished he stayed quiet for a while longer. Chloe, he said, I believe you. I know you didn't mean any harm. But you know what I was going to do today, right? I thought so. I was going to ask you to marry me. I'd been preparing for 3 weeks. I asked the restaurant owner to save our table, asked for the flowers to be brought beforehand. I even arranged with your sister to wait outside so we could celebrate together. He paused. And you were 20 minutes late. Tyler, I know, but I couldn't leave that lady in the middle of the rain. She almost... I know you couldn't. I know that's how you are. But Chloe, that's exactly the point. For 2.5 years I've been waiting for you to prioritize us. And today, on the most important day I planned for us, you prioritized a stranger. The silence that followed weighed more than any words. That's not fair, she said, her voice weak. Maybe it isn't, but it's how I feel. They didn't fight. There was no shouting, no slamming doors. It was worse than that. It was that calm, quiet, tired conversation where both know they've reached a point where there's no going back to how things were without changing something fundamental. Tyler said he needed time to think. Chloe said she understood. And they hung up. She sat in that chair at the restaurant for another hour. The waiter brought her a glass of water without her asking. She took every sip slowly. In the days that followed, Tyler's silence grew. At first it was hours, then it was days. Sometimes she'd text him and he'd reply short, without the warmth from before. She tried to set up a meeting. He said he was busy. She tried again. He said he needed space. Look, I keep thinking about that part and catch myself wanting to go back in time to scream at her, Chloe, go after him. But then I remember that real life doesn't work that way. Sometimes the moment slips away and doesn't come back. And the worst part is that she knew it. She knew it while she was living through it. 3 weeks went by. On a Sunday afternoon, Chloe saw a photo on social media of Tyler at a bar. Next to him, a woman she didn't know. The two of them were smiling at the camera with that easy smile of people who are genuinely doing well. She didn't cry right then. It came hours later in the middle of the night, that kind of crying that hurts because there's no concrete reason for it to start and no right time for it to end. The ring stayed tucked away in a drawer. She didn't know what to do with it. It wasn't hers, but giving it back felt like closing a door with a kind of violence she wasn't ready to feel yet. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. It was at the beginning of the following month that Mrs. Martha called. Chloe almost didn't answer because she didn't recognize the number, but something made her slide her finger across the screen. Chloe, it's me, Martha, the lady from the rain. She had gotten the number from the receptionist at the clinic, who had the emergency number Chloe had left just in case before leaving that afternoon. Mrs. Martha said she had thought a lot before calling, that she didn't want to bother her, that she knew she didn't have a real reason to be calling, but that she couldn't get that girl out of her head and wanted to know if she was okay. "I am," Chloe said, and then, "Sort of." Mrs. Martha paused. "Sort of. I understand. Would you like to have coffee with me someday?" There was no logical reason to accept. Chloe barely knew that woman. They had spent about 20 minutes together in the rain, but she said yes before thinking. They met on a Wednesday afternoon at a small cafe near Mrs. Martha's house. The lady arrived 10 minutes early, already seated with the straight posture of someone who learned etiquette in an era when that mattered a great deal. Her white hair was neatly arranged, the same pearl necklace, a different coat, but in the same beige tone as before. They had coffee. They ate cheese biscuits. Mrs. Martha asked about Chloe's job. She was an administrative assistant at a small company and listened with genuine attention. Chloe asked about her health, and Martha told her about the appointment, about the doctor she had liked, about a test she would need to repeat. At no point did Chloe talk about Tyler, but Mrs. Martha asked, almost at the end, in that direct, straightforward way that only those who have lived a long time can have, "Is there someone special in your life?" Chloe looked at the bottom of her cup. There was? Mrs. Martha didn't ask anything else. She just said, "These things hurt differently depending on where you are in life when they come," and she changed the subject. They said goodbye on the sidewalk. Martha said she would like to meet again. Chloe said she would too. And that's how a friendship neither of them had planned began. In the following months, they saw each other with a frequency that grew naturally, once a week, then sometimes twice. Chloe started picking up Martha for appointments when the lady asked. Martha started keeping Chloe's favorite cheese biscuits every time the girl came to visit. It was a simple exchange, nothing extraordinary about it, that slowly became an important part of both their lives, almost without them realizing it. It was on one of those visits on a Saturday afternoon that Chloe heard the door to Martha's house open with a key and a voice calling out, "Mum, I brought the fruit you asked for." She turned around. The man who came through the door was in his mid-40s, dark hair with a few grey strands at the temples, a focused expression that only relaxed when he saw that his mother had company. He was tall, simply dressed, dark pants, grey shirt, but there was something in the way he moved, the way he looked around the room that conveyed that quiet confidence of someone used to making decisions. "This is David," Martha said, with a tone that suggested she was presenting something she considered important. "My son. The only one, unfortunately." David looked at his mother with affectionate patience. "Mom, it's true. You're the only one I have." She turned to Chloe. "And this is Chloe, the girl who helped me in that rain I told you about." Something crossed David's face. Recognition, but also curiosity. "You're the girl with the umbrella," he said. "That's me. My mother mentioned you at least 10 times. Martha waved a hand as if dismissing the comment. "Don't exaggerate." David stayed for a while that afternoon, had coffee, talked, asked Chloe a few questions with that attentive manner she came to notice over the course of the conversation. It wasn't intrusive, it was genuine. He actually listened, and when she spoke, he wasn't thinking about what he was going to say next. He was just listening. When he left, he said goodbye with a firm handshake and said, "Thank you for taking care of her." Just like that. But there was something about that afternoon that lingered in the air after he was gone. In the following weeks, David's name kept coming up in conversations with Martha in a way that grew little by little. His mother told stories about him, stories from when he was a child, stories from work. He managed a network of real estate and development projects that his father had started decades earlier and that he had expanded over the years. Martha spoke of all of this with pride, but also with a hint of worry that she sometimes let slip. "David works too much. Ever since the marriage ended 3 years ago, he hasn't stopped. I tell him life isn't just work. He pretends to listen and doesn't change a thing." Chloe processed the information without reacting, but she processed it. Then came Martha's birthday dinner, which her son organized at his house. There were few guests, 3 old friends of the mother, a distant cousin, and Chloe, who Martha had insisted should come. "Your family," the older woman had said, with that firmness of hers that left no room for argument. At that dinner, Chloe and David exchanged more words than at any other time. They talked about her father, who had worked in construction his whole life, about his mother, who had lost some of her mobility lately but refused to admit it, about that strange feeling of taking care of someone who spent their entire life taking care of you. "You have that way about you," he said at one point more quietly, as if thinking out loud. "What way?" "Of making people feel safe. My mother is a person who doesn't accept help from anyone, never has, and with you, she accepts it." Chloe didn't know what to say. She looked away at her cup. "I had to pause here when I read this part for the first time, because there are things you feel before you understand them, and this scene is one of them. But then life, as always, decided to complicate things." 2 days after the dinner, Chloe received a call from Tyler. It wasn't their first contact in months. They had exchanged a few scattered messages, nothing deep, but a phone call was different. His voice was different too, softer. He said he had been thinking a lot. He said he had made a mistake in pushing away what they had because of one night, a night when she had, in fact, done exactly what he had always admired in her. He said the woman in the photo was nothing serious, that it had ended a long time ago. Chloe heard everything. Sitting on the bed, looking out the window at the rain outside again, it seemed like the rain always came back at important moments. "Tyler," she said when he finished, "you made me feel like helping a lady in need was a mistake. That stayed with me." "I know. And I was wrong." "But you felt that. That's what came out of you in that moment. And I kept thinking, if I were with you, how many times would I feel like that? That I was prioritizing the wrong person because the right person was you." He fell silent. "I loved you a lot," she said, "and I still have a lot of affection for you. But I think we weren't wrong about each other. We were wrong for each other." The conversation ended without a fight. It just ended. And when she hung up, she didn't cry. She stayed quiet, looking at the rain, and felt something that took a while to identify. Lightness. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot since we're just starting out. Now, continuing, what came after was slow, as real things are. David started appearing at visits to Martha more often on the weekends, which Chloe only noticed after Martha herself, without any ceremony, said, "He asked me when you usually come." "And what did you say?" The lady smiled sideways, with that air of someone who wasn't born yesterday. "I told him you usually come on Saturdays." Chloe stared at her. "Mrs. Martha. What? Am I lying?" It wasn't simple. David was a man who carried a lot. The family business, the end of a marriage that had lasted almost 10 years, the silent concern for his mother that he tried to hide behind practicality. And Chloe was a woman who had just left a relationship that had made her question her own way of loving. They started talking. Slowly. Messages that began with practical matters. He'd ask if Martha had taken the right medication. She'd respond and add something her mother had said that day. And they began to expand into other territory, other times of day, other subjects. One afternoon, he invited her for coffee. Just the two of them. She went. They stayed almost 2 hours at that cafe, and Chloe realized time had passed in a way she didn't expect. He was funny in a dry, understated way that she gradually caught on to, and there was a seriousness in him that wasn't distance. It was care. It was the way of someone who had been hurt before and learned to measure things before making a move. But what happened at the end of that coffee was what changed everything. David was quiet for a moment, looking at his cup, and said, "My mother told me what happened that rainy day. Not just that you helped her. She told me you were late for somewhere important. That's why it was difficult afterward." Chloe felt her chest tighten. "She told you that?" "She told me she only found out weeks later, when you were already friends, and that it stayed on her mind." He looked up at her. She felt remorse. Chloe didn't know what to say. "I have too," he continued, "because I know the cost of what that cost you, and you never said anything to her." "Why would I? It wasn't her fault." "I know." He paused. "But I think you're the kind of person who's been carrying things alone for too long." The sentence fell between them with a weight that neither of them tried to lift right away. That night, when Chloe got home, she kept thinking about it, about how true it was. In those months she had learned to let herself receive Martha's friendship, David's care, her own realization that the end of a relationship wasn't defeat. They were another few months. There were good days and complicated ones. David had a 12-year-old son from a previous relationship who lived with his mother and spent weekends with him, and Chloe slowly learned what it meant to enter a space where bonds were already formed. The boy's name was Leo, quiet at first, and he opened up over time. One day she helped him with a school assignment about an ancient history topic, and he said, without looking at her, "You explain it better than my teacher." And it was that kind of small thing that stays with you. Martha got sick in January, a respiratory infection that turned out more serious than the doctors initially expected, and that kept her hospitalized for almost 2 weeks. Chloe went to the hospital every day. David was there too, and there were moments when the two of them sat in the hallway without saying anything, side by side, just being there. It was on one of those moments that he held her hand, without saying a word. Just held it, and she didn't pull away. When Martha was discharged, the first thing she said upon seeing the two of them walk into the room together was, "Thank God. I was already worried I'd have to stay another month in here for this to happen." David shook his head with a smile. "Mom." "What?" "I'm not lying." Chloe laughed, and it was a free laugh. Whole. The kind that doesn't need context to be understood. Life fell back into rhythm. Martha regained her strength. Not all of it, not like before, but enough to get back to coffee on Wednesday afternoons. Enough to go back to saving cheese biscuits whenever Chloe came to visit. Enough to go back to giving unsolicited opinions about everything, with that firm tone of someone who is 74 years old and has earned the right to say what she thinks. On a Saturday in May, David asked Chloe to spend the afternoon with him. They went to a park on the other side of the city, a big, quiet place with old trees and a lake in the center. They walked around aimlessly, unhurried. At some point he stopped. He took a small box out of his pocket, not navy blue velvet. It was a simple box of light wood with a ribbon tied around it. "I'm not the kind of guy who does this with lights and an orchestra," he said. "And you don't seem like the kind of person who needs that." Chloe looked at the little box. Her heart was racing. "But I want to ask you something before you open it," he went on. "That rainy day, if you had known what it would cost, would you have done it differently?" she thought. Really, she stood there thinking, looking at the lake. "No," she said, "I wouldn't have." He nodded slowly. "That's what I needed to know." Inside the little box was a simple ring, no stone, silver with a smooth texture. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed, the kind of thing that lasts. He didn't ask if she wanted to marry him. He said, "It doesn't have to be now, but I want you to know that it's what I want. When you're ready." "If you are." Chloe stared at the ring for a while, then she looked at him. "I'm going to need to return a ring that's been in my drawer," she said, with a hint of a laugh. He made a face. "What are you talking about?" "It's a long story. I've got time." And she told it. There in the park, with the old trees around them and the quiet lake in front, she told him everything. Tyler, the meeting, the rain, the note, the navy blue velvet ring that had sat in a drawer for months. David listened from beginning to end without interrupting, and when she finished, he stayed quiet for a moment before saying, "You know that if you hadn't been late that night, you never would have run into my mother again." She hadn't thought of it that way, but it was true. Sometimes life charges a price before showing you what's been waiting for you on the other side, and you only understand the meaning much later, when you're already on the other side. Camilla looked at the ring in her hand, at the lake, at the open sky of that cloudless May afternoon. and she put the ring on her finger. End of story. And so closes another story that reached us with all the force that real life knows how to have. Chloe didn't need grand gestures. She just needed to be who she always was, and life found a way to meet her halfway. Now I want to know from you. Would you have stopped to help Mrs. Martha, knowing what you could lose? Leave it in the comments, where you're watching from, and what you thought of this story. We read everything with great care. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. Thank you so much for your company up to this point.